My name is Irene Manion, and I'm from New South Wales in Australia. I live in a suburb called Dora Creek, which is part of Lake Macquarie, north of Sydney in New South Wales. I'm a former secondary visual arts teacher, and I spent 40 years plus teaching visual arts to secondary students, and was always exhibiting art through my teaching career. And at one stage, my training had been in fine arts, and I'd only understood that there was painting, drawing, and sculpture. But during my training for the students to extend what I was able to teach in the classroom, I came across textiles and felt a sudden affinity for it. And that has never left me. So I have been working in textiles almost from when I was 23. Started in batik as a technique, the Indonesian wax application to fabric. Studied dyeing in depth. But when my children arrived, I felt that it was probably too toxic to be working with that medium in front of nearby my children. So I moved more towards machine embroidery and applique, and found a technique called transfer printing, which is really clean. You paint with crayons or paints onto paper, and then it is transferred via heat process to fabric, but it has to be a synthetic fabric. So, yeah, since retiring from teaching, I've moved up to our holiday house, what used to be our holiday house at Lake Macquarie, and have a studio, a big double room studio where I am right now, and have just been focusing on doing my art and having regular exhibitions since my retirement. About a long time before I'd retired, I did a piece for an exhibition that I was invited to participate in, which was based on the lorikeets that were coming into my backyard. Now, the lorikeet is a piece that I've also put into Aviary, and it is an amazing bird for the colours that it has in its feathers. It's called a rainbow lorikeet for a good reason, because its colours range from blues to reds to yellows to greens, the most vivid greens. And so for that exhibition, I basically embroidered 100 of those rainbow lorikeets against a background of a moon. And I think that started me. I think that was the very first piece that I did on birds. And since I moved up to Lake Macquarie, every day when I go for my regular walk, I take my camera with me and just photograph any birds, especially birds in flight that I spot. And I try to name them. I'm getting more and more familiar with rarer birds and not just backyard birds. And it's just become an obsession. So from as long as I can remember, I always wanted to draw. And my parents, if they gave me something that had something to do with drawing or painting or some sort of design work, anything hands-on, that was the best present they could give me. So I've always wanted to do art. If they asked me what I wanted to be, it was an artist. And it's a way of life. I think it became my career, and it's what I do without even thinking. It's what I like to do every day. And it's a passion. And I suppose I'd say I feel driven to do it. So I couldn't imagine not being able to do it. It would just be so awful if I couldn't. So my process of working with textiles has evolved. I guess it started off doing batik, which was just dyeing. That was when I lived in Sydney. Then I became obsessed with sewing machine and embroidering. So my studio is a long double room, and at one end of the studio I have my sewing machine with all of the threads that I've collected, and they are something I do wherever I go. I'm on the search for threads in all the different shades of colour. And um, from the sewing machine, I've developed, using that transfer printing technique, um, a way of working digitally on a computer using Photoshop and all of the photo pro apps like Illustrator.
Mm-hmm.
And I develop those on the computer with images or photos that are digital photos that I've taken that I import, and then I manipulate them on the laptop till I get the um, the final image. So if you ask me which am I one of these artists that doesn't know what the final artwork will look like until I finish it, I'm the opposite, I think. I design it and have it pretty well sorted out on my screen because then what I need to do is send my designs to a printer to be dye sublimated, and then they print them and send them back to me. So
Mm-hmm.
once I've got the designs printed, and I do two lots, I do one with the background and I do one of the bird.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I do that is if you embroider heavily on fabric, people will know,
Mm-hmm.
it shrinks the fabric quite considerably. So if
Mm-hmm.
I were to just use one layer, what would happen is my background, I would either have to embroider with the same intensity the entire background, or what I do is applique it onto a background that has less stitching, which stops the background from puckering up so much.
Mm.
So yeah, they send me back two prints, and then once I've got the prints, I then start intensively stitching on the bird. And over time, I've developed this technique of stitching, which is unusual. It's not that common. So most people, when they do free motion machine embroidery, they stitch rapidly. They put the accelerator down and then they rotate the fabric underneath a rapidly moving needle. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
I mimic, it's a bit like Japanese hand embroidery. I basically put the needle in at one point, move the fabric, and then pop it in at another point, often often copying the pattern on a feather, for example, the barbs on a feather.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really slow process comparatively, but it's a lot faster than working by hand. It would take me forever to do the same thing by hand. And the
Mm-hmm.
result is that these heavily embroidered birds are embroidered with a fabric that has sheen. I mean, threads that have sheen. And by putting them in different directions, they capture the light in different ways. And so the result is that the birds tend to look almost hyperreal rather
Mm-hmm.
than just a photo. So the biggest challenge is I have thought about this, and I think is the actual embroidery itself. It's really intensive. So I have an image of the bird on the screen in front of me in detail, and I can zoom in on it. But
Mm-hmm.
to get the colors correct, to get because the light falls on the threads, sometimes the light will make it look much lighter and will make it look darker. So I line up all the tones of, say, blacks or greens so that it's more intuitive, so that I know exactly what thread I need to get a particular feather finished or a lighting effect on a bird or whatever. So it
Mm-hmm.
requires intense concentration. That's the biggest challenge. All right. So Death and Transfiguration was the earlier one that I created, and it happened about a year after my mother died. And I'd been going through a process of mourning her, but a year later, the emotions were still just as intense for me. I was still feeling the pain. Um, so I decided the lorikeets were visiting the backyard to do a piece that was a dedication to my mother, and I felt that the lorikeet in all its beauty symbolized the rich relationship that I'd had with my mother. and I'd managed to take a shot of a bird that was on a branch that was just peeping back over its shoulder, looking back at me as if to say goodbye. So that I put into my computer and placed on, I called it carpet pieces. So I had the bird perching on, I guess it could be a carpet or a weaving. It was a two-dimensional backdrop. And into that, I was informed by Lithuanian weavings. So in my parents' home country, weaving was a major traditional technique. And my aunt, who taught me how to do a certain type of weaving, showed me that all these motifs. So I took a bird motif and used the colors of the rainbow lorikeet digitally and created, through repetition, a backdrop that resembled perhaps a Lithuanian weaving based on the lorikeets. And the final piece was a white bird in this long stitch technique, which was the bird drained of life, which is hanging upside down in that image. And that backdrop is fading behind that bird, whereas it's intense, as though the colour has come from the bird and saturated into the weaving. So that's the story behind that piece. The other one is a later piece, which was based on observations of birds in my backyard during the drought, and the mother bird had only had one child, one baby magpie that season instead of two. And I would always go out with my camera when they were in the backyard and try and take shots of them. And on this day, the mother was playing with the youngster, and she was nipping its wings, and it was lying on its back and kicking its feet in the air. So I captured that in the photograph and decided to make that the subject of the other image that's in Aviary. And it's just been placed in a digital background again. And it's a more joyous celebration of these birds. Being in aviary is one of the highlights of my career. I've only ever exhibited in Australia. I've only exhibited in smaller groups. To actually have my work taken to the United States and then be put into an exhibition that travels around the United States is huge for me. It's a big thing on my CV. So I'm grateful and I'm absolutely honoured to have my work in this exhibition. Absolutely. Well, I hope they appreciate the story that went into, particularly into death and transfiguration, but also enjoy the beautiful interaction between the two magpies in the other piece. I also hope that people will be intrigued by the techniques that I've used, especially that long stitch technique, which is something that I've developed over time. So I hope they come away with an enjoyment of the pieces. Yeah. Well, I think it's one of the best mediums for people to take on because it is so broad. Painting and drawing, you're still stuck with something that's two-dimensional, whereas I've been through batik, I've been through surface design, I have tried felting, I've tried a whole lot of different techniques that allow you pretty well to express yourself in ways that are just not available in any other medium. I think also because I'm female, I feel that it's something that I naturally gravitate towards because I'm ironing and washing and doing all that sort of things with fabrics on a regular basis. So, yeah, it's one of the most versatile media or mediums that you could possibly engage in. There are 3 different versions that I created for the Death and Transfiguration piece, and then I show you how I fiddle with it digitally before it actually gets printed. This is the Death and Transfiguration that people will see at the gallery. And these are two versions that I created before I was satisfied with the final version. So I was playing with the background. In the one on the left, the bird is the same one as the one that's in Death and Transfiguration, but the background's completely different. And then in the one on the right, I tried a different bird photo, and that one actually works reasonably well, but I wasn't as happy with that one as I was with finally the one that I used in Death and Transfiguration. These are two smaller squares that became part of that weaving. And you can, by making them enlarge, you can see what I did in Adobe Illustrator. So I used gradations of tone in each bar and I had divided the square up into a grid and then worked on each section of the grid. And you can sort of see the blue head of the bird and the large red body on the left, or the large green body on the right. And then the colours of the bird woven into the background, which became this in an earlier iteration of it. So there's yellow birds sideways, and then a green bird and a red bird. And then it finally became that as the final weaving.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've got is a close-up of two birds. So in this one, you can actually see how the stitching, the long stitches follow the barbs in the feathers of the bird. And what actually happened was the bird curved as I stitched it. So it became much more three-dimensional because of the stitching. And then this one highlights the stitching pattern of this long stitch technique and how it creates texture and pattern through the different directions that the stitches are laid down onto the fabric. The other one, that's in an even closer up version of it. And then finally, I've got the wrong title there. In sorry about that. I can't even think of the name. It's called Preparing for Adulthood. This was the little magpie lying down on the floor. That's a close-up, and you can see the stitching in the magpie's wings especially. And that is a photo of me actually stitching at the machine and creating those long stitch techniques in that tail feather. So that's it. That's all. That was just showing you how that was done.